Welcome to Gatecrashers, a podcast dedicated to kicking open the door to your next favorite thing. Our mission, our creed, our code is this: to make all things more approachable and accessible to everyone. We want you to find a universe that you'll fall in love with. I'm Quinn, and today we're interviewing Eisner-winning writer Kelly Thompson, who you may know from her extensive work at Marvel, including a 50-issue run on Captain Marvel and the creation of Jeff the Landshark in West Coast Avengers. You might also know her as the writer of Black Cloak for Image and the upcoming Birds of Prey book for DC. So how are you doing today, Kelly?
I'm great. Thanks. How are you?
Good. Figuring this whole podcast thing out, doing it on the fly.
It'll be good.
Yep. Doing this best we can. Okay. Today, we're going to do a bit of a double feature interview where we talk about your recently released creator-owned comic, The Cull, and then after that, it's Jeff, which is going to receive a new printed edition and new Infinity comic on Marvel Unlimited this fall. So first, we got to get down to business. We at Gatecrashers are hard-hitting journalists, and I had to start you off with the most important question in our arsenal. What's your favorite sandwich?
Gosh, that's hard. I'm a big sandwich fan, so it's hard to narrow it down. I mean, I think if I can get it exactly the way I want it, like an Italian sub is definitely like one of the peak, like the perfect combination of all those ingredients on like really great fresh made crunchy bread. Oh man, that's the dream. But like, can you beat a great BLT, with like heirloom tomatoes? Oh, so good. Probably a BLT. I'm going to go with a BLT.
Got it. That's a good one. So for everyone at home, The Cull has recently hit comic stores. It's about a group of meddling kids who go to a beach late at night under the pretense that one of them, Cleo, is filming a movie. And then plot twist, she didn't bring them there to film a movie. She brought them there to find her missing brother. And so all the kids find some weird shit in the cave. And where did this story come from? Was it inspired by your own teenage years or your own friends or anything like that?
I think it was inspired by not my own youth or whatever. My youth was incredibly boring and not full of adventures. Like Goonies-style adventures. Like that was very not my vibe. That was always a fantasy that I enjoyed watching. I did love Goonies as a kid. I think this book is very different from that, but there's certainly, it's certainly a little bit of a love letter to those kind of stories for sure. And certainly the location. I live in Portland, Oregon, in Cannon Beach, just an hour and a half away at the coast, is a very famous haystack rock. There's one really big rock and two smaller, more sort of narrow rocks that are called the Needles, or sometimes they're called the Sisters. Anyway, they're all very famous. They're very beautiful. A lot of people might recognize them from Goonies because they filmed along the Oregon coast, and a lot of it takes place in Astoria, which is up there. And so yeah, I love that location. I was transfixed by it as a kid, and it still holds a lot of wonder and magic for me now. And when you go to those, if you ever have the chance to go to rocks like that, I guess I can't speak for other rocks in other parts of the country, although there's another big rock that sticks out of the water like this in Morro Bay in California. And it's true of that rock too, I'd say. But there's something incredibly alien feeling about this like huge thing coming out of the ocean. And yet, it's just the earth. It's just more rocks, so there's nothing more natural, but it feels foreign. And I love that sort of dichotomy. And I think that sort of inspired the idea of a sci-fi story, because I feel those rocks are so supernatural. I mean, truly my dream would be to have a little house right in front of that haystack rock, because I think looking at it is just it's transformative almost. And so I wanted a story that could do all that stuff. I pitched this along with a few others to Mattia when we were talking about working together. And he picked this one. And I was secretly like very excited, because it was not only my favorite of the pitches, but, Mattia's got that incredibly realistic style that I knew would be just amazing to witness, him take a crack at this. He'd be able to both build like such an accurate real world that this is inspired by, and then I knew he could just really cut loose in like the sci-fi things we were going to play with. So it's a lot of influences and things I love coming into play, types of stories I like. I love stories. I think magical realism is sort of how you describe it, where everything is the same with like one big change. I think those stories are very intoxicating because the real world aspect is very relatable, and it really throws you into it to be like, oh man, what if that could happen in my world, with like a crazy thing. It's like movies like Arrival, where it just feels really grounded and real, and then you're throwing this conceivable but wild, sci-fi element to it or whatever. And I just love those kind of stories. So
yeah, and it definitely makes the strange sort of genre aspects of it like stand out even more than they would if you had a ton of different fantasy things. And
yeah, I feel a little bad. I was looking when we categorized this as like fantasy and sci-fi, and we didn't call it horror. And I feel a little bad about that because it is very much a horror story, but I have that problem a lot with my work where it doesn't feel like it's a horror genre. Like I would never call it that. But then, once you dig into it, it's pretty horrifying. And I'm sorry to say, I think maybe that's just life, because I'm not out here trying to write the horror genre. That's not really what I think I'm doing. And yet people have said that about a lot of my creator-owned work. There are horror elements to Black Cloak, although I wouldn't categorize it as such. My book, The Girl Who Would Be King, my book, Story Killer, like now the Cull. I just think, there's a lot of horror to be mined in, science fiction tropes, but also in the everyday. Like it's not that hard to get to, oh, great, that's horrifying, And so I like to deal with those heady issues when I'm not trying to make people laugh.
Yeah, I definitely noticed that you've got you're very good at handling very vastly different tones of writing.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, I was just going to say that it handles some pretty heavy subjects. So how do you know the line for what to show versus what do you imply? Is it just sort of...
Are you talking specifically about the Cull or just in general?
Yeah, in the Cull.
Yeah. I think that part of this is going to be a very unhelpful answer, but I think that you can put a lot of trust in your collaborators not even if you know them so well, because, Matty and I never talk on the phone, where we just email with each other, and we know very much about each other's very little about each other's personal lives. We just work together, and we work really well together, and we talk about the work. And, and for him, he's doing even heavier lifting because he's Italian. So he's operating in not his native language, but his English is very good. I mean, thank God we don't have to communicate in Italian. We'd have about one page. But because I only speak one language and sort of read French, maybe on a good day with a gun to my head. So I think that even without knowing the ins and outs of everything about your partner in crime, if your intentions are both aligned and good, I think you can really lean on each other a little bit about and trust each other, when he's making choices about what to show, okay, so a good example would be in the scene with Lux, where she's peeking out at her mom who's asleep on the couch. When Mattia first did that, he had the mother really beat up. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I just think that's way too far. If we go that far, I think we have to address it more in the text than rather showing that this is a recurring problem and it's very serious, but this isn't what this is about. This is part of the context of what this is about. You know what I mean? Like if you push it too far, you not only run the risk of trying to sensationalize it, but you also run the risk of letting it overcome the narrative. And it's not the narrative, it's part of the narrative. It's part of building the layers of these characters. And, I definitely want you to fall in love with these characters because that's what you always want as a creator. And also because in this story in particular, we're really going to put them through it. And so you need to care about them to invest in the story. But I would also say that, like, narratively, all that stuff in the first issue, it will be important in issue 5. Like, this isn't just like a superhero book or an adventure book or whatever. It's about trauma. It's about overcoming loss. It's about like really heady stuff. And, we're doing it with like a sci-fi twist and a pseudo kaiju involved, judging from the opening. So, it's you're using monsters to talk about other things mostly. I mean, not to give the game away, but so I think that stuff is all really important. And you just sort of, you try to do the right thing. And then you and your artist watch each other and your editor, and, you all try to get there at the same time. I will say there's a scene in 2 that I rewrote like 5 or 6 times after Mattia did the art. Because I just wanted to get it just right. And it's exactly that sort of thing you're talking about where you want to skirt the line. You want to talk about it and you want to be honest about it and you don't want to pull punches, but you also don't want to sensationalize it or, so you want to be careful in what you show and say. It's tricky.
That was actually really good. You're like, I'm not going to have a really good answer for this. And I'm like, but then you did like the exact stuff that I was looking for there.
Well, good.
Yeah. But yeah, that's something I noticed and put in like the interview that I wrote that isn't out yet or anything, that it feels like it doesn't sensationalize it. It addresses that their lives are rough, but it's not like fucking 13 Reasons Why or something like that, which is just like, look at this.
Yeah, it's not presented as dramatic. It's presented as matter of fact. And that's very deliberate, both to show that these kids are pretty special in that they're pretty smart and they're pretty, sort of creative and interesting. I mean, it's not just any kids who the summer you're 18 before you go to college who are like, let's all take a day and get up at 3:30 in the morning and hike out to shoot a short film. Like, they're ambitious, interesting kids, and they come from ambitious, interesting places. And some of the context, like all of us, some of the context of their lives is not super great. And like all of us, they're sort of doing their best. And it's not always working. Yeah. And they need help sometimes,
Yeah. So it's probably a spoiler to ask the specific question of what the hell is that freaky crab thing? But can I ask about the design process? Because what's that like? Do you tell Mattia draw a monster and give kind of some rough details, or do you have like a really detailed list of like all these different traits that you want it to have and the vibes that you want it to have?
So I would say maybe a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Like, I don't want to tell Mattia what to do, of course. He's a brilliant designer. So, and his creativity is incredible. So what I want to do is give him enough to get started and then help the process when I can, and mostly get out of his way. So I think in the case of the monster I put together, and the case of the kids, because I knew I wanted to do this, with Mattia's, excuse me, I have hiccups.
Oh.
Sorry. With Mattia's incredibly realistic style, one of the gifts you inherit with that is that he I don't have to load everything down with exposition. I don't have to say when they're leaving because there's a borderline photorealistic clock that says, 3:30 a.m. or whatever on it. So working with him is this beautiful gift where I can pull back on what I have to say because there's no chance with his style of art that you're missing the details unless you're just going too fast, and you can read it that way. But yeah, you're going to miss stuff. You're going to miss clues. I heard someone talking about this the other day, and I guess two of them were reading it and one of them really, really liked it and the other one, I guess, didn't. And so when the other guy was talking about it, he was calling out some of these details, including the cuts on Cleo's arm, and the other guy didn't even see them. And I just thought, and that sort of blew that guy's mind. But it doesn't really blow my mind. It tells me you're going too fast. Like, if you didn't see that on I think it's on page 4, you're going too fast. Slow down.
Yeah.
Certainly for the Cull, it's true. Maybe not for every comic, but I'd make an argument. Maybe you're going too fast all the time. Like, it's meant to be, you're supposed to be filling in the gaps in the gutters. Like, that's how the storytelling works. So if you're going so fast that you're missing the details, how do you know you're filling in the right bits in the gutters, between panels? That's part of your job. It's why comics is one of the most interesting mediums, I think, is because so much relies on the creators, like, being smart with the choices they're making because it's a very limited space they have. But then it becomes a collaboration truly between you and the creators about what you're filling in, because they can't draw every single panel. They have to ask you to fill in the gap. And a good creator knows how to do that, so you fill the gap correctly. But if you're going so quickly that you're missing really key details they've put in, then I think you got to look at it again.
Yeah.
But that's very true for the Cull. Because of Mattia's style, I was able to really pull back on the narration and give him a lot of room. But that meant I had to preload for him. What do these people's houses look like? What are these characters into? Who are they? So I made them all sort of interested in film and sort of amateur filmmakers. You don't need to know this. It's not important to the plot. Otherwise I would have put it in. But they're sort of, as a crew, it's sort of like Cleo mostly writes and Kate mostly directs and Will mostly films and Wade does everything and Lux is mostly in front of the camera. So that's like their little troupe, and they do different things and they experiment with different things and they play together. Like, they're learning, they're fun, they're cute, they're smart, they're interesting, and maybe they're going to end the world, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
But because you could lay all that in and have Mattia figure all that out, but you have to give him the tools for that. So similarly to the way we built the characters, we built the monster. I sent him a lot of notes. We knew the location. He has rocks. I don't know how similar they are to the haystack rocks, but he has rock formations like that in Italy, which is awesome that we can both be inspired by similar but completely different regional rocks. I love that. And so, I think I gave him some references. I don't want to give away what those references were because I don't want to lead people too much, but I gave him some both real world references and some things from fiction that I thought, we don't want this, but this is the right size, maybe, or maybe it moves like this, or maybe, so we gave him a lot of that stuff. And then he just started designing. We definitely did a few passes. Especially in figuring out, you can see that those are pod things that are separate, that seem separate from the creature. So there was all of that to figure out. And yeah, it was, that's really some of the most fun stuff you get to do in comics is building that kind of stuff and just riffing off of each other to create something fun. So,
yeah, monsters are always great. And I love how certain fictional monsters will borrow things from other fictional monsters, which borrow from other ones. And it's kind of like this,
yeah,
I don't know, sort of evolution in a sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So between Hawkeye and West Coast Avengers and the Cull, you write a lot of teenagers. So how do you avoid the dreaded, how do you do, fellow kids style of dialogue?
Well, I'm sure I don't always. I'm sure there are plenty of people who are like, kids don't talk like this, or, whatever they say. I don't know. what's the trick? I don't know. I guess I would say you can't write like kids really talk, because I mean, you can't write like anybody really talks, because people are dumb and not smart and not funny in the day to day. I mean, they are, but you know, you got to pick and choose. You got to edit to get like the version of your day that you'd want to read in a comic book has to be highly edited down. So you can't just like listen to the way people talk and be like, oh, I'll put that because that's real, that's natural, whatever. You got to clean it up and tighten it up so that it's, you know, more of like, I don't know. For me, the balance is listening to the way people talk, to their rhythms, to how things sound in a really natural way, and then taking that and like cleaning it up and adding just a little bit of poetry and cadence to it when I can, that so that it sort of skirts the line between realistic and what you actually want to read. You know, I went to a wedding and I was like very disappointed by all the speeches. And I was talking to my partner about it, and he's like, well, they're not writers, Kelly. He's like, they're not comedians and writers and people who traffic in this. They're just normal people who are just, you know, maybe not good with words or whatever. And I had this moment of, I was like, man, you're so right. Like, I was so hard on them because I expected them to like pull out a Steven Soderbergh speech. And of course they didn't. We're just humans. But it made me think a lot about how much you have to clean up real world dialogue to make it feel beautiful and interesting, but that if you go too far, you strip like the humanity out of it. And so I think there's a really fine line there. And sometimes you don't get it right, you know, sometimes you miss, but I sort of think that's where the merge is. I would never say that my teens sound like actual teens. I feel like when I get it right, they feel like the good media version of it, you know, where it doesn't feel false and it doesn't feel like it's trying too hard. And then, you know, you just hope it's authentic enough, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. I just thought it was pretty good because I was reading West Coast Avengers when I was like in my early 20s, and I was like, they sound all right. This isn't cringe. This is good. Good job.
Thank you. Yeah, West Coast Avengers is tough. They're a little tough. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see, I've got more stuff on them later, but those rocks in the pink ocean sure look pretty similar, don't they?
In the pink ocean? Yeah, I mean, it's not. What are you trying to get me to give away?
Nothing. Yeah. Okay, so those are all the questions that I had on the Cull, but I just also one thing that I accidentally skipped was that I thought you guys did a really good job on Jessica Jones' Blind Spot and Purple Daughter as a creative team. I checked that out before I did this, and it's like, wow, this is really good.
Thank you.
All the stuff with her, and oh, you're welcome, and Luke, and it's very gripping. It's very good.
We had a lot of fun with that. Purple Daughter, especially, you know, I was so grateful to have Mattia there. It was such an emotional story. It was so hard, but I was really proud of what we did there. And I loved the handoff we had, which I guess if you're reading it as like a collected graphic novel, it probably reads less impressively. But if you're reading it in single issues, you know, the issue that they're in the illusion of Purple Daughter that has Philippe Andrade art. And like when he breaks out of that, when she punches her way free of that and it goes back into the Mattia art, I loved that, like breaking out of the illusion. It's actually really hard to do that because just the way the comic is structured, you know, they want one artist on 20 pages and then whatever. And so I was like, no, you gotta, like, can we talk? Can we let Philippe know, like we'll pay him for the full issue or whatever, but Maddie has got to draw those last 2 pages because she breaks out of the illusion. It's got to change. Like that's the whole conceit. I really had to have a lot of conversations about it to convince them, but we did it and it was great.
I'm glad. It definitely seems like Big Two comics there's a lot of battles there, and
Yep.
When things work out, like it's just really cool when there's things like, doing the technique of there's two different writers here, so you got the fake version
Yeah.
and you got reality. But yeah, I definitely noticed that, and is a really good part of that. Speaking of Big Two comics, let's talk Jeff. So not to be dramatic, but this character has basically saved my life. I go back to his comics time and time again just to see like all the things that this silly little guy is dealing, and he cheers me up. He gets me through some rough patches, and he's, the background of, or he's the lock screen of my phone. So, he's the first thing I see and the last thing I see. And I just love Jeff the Land Shark. He's loved him since West Coast Avengers, and he's my boy.
He's amazing.
Yeah.
He's I'm so glad people love him and are finding him and discovering him and like embracing him. You worry about the sort of, no pun intended, jump the shark moment, but it's just so fun. He fits, and he's so flexible. I mean, I didn't even mean to do this. It just happened, but you can just put him in almost any scenario. It's just a great character that's been a total joy for me.
Yeah. And I definitely think his stuff like fills a lot of fans want to see like superheroes just hanging out, but obviously like the higher up people would be like, you can't do a comic around that. So having Jeff there definitely presents like a bunch of scenarios where it can just show day to day. Here's like a pool party.
Yeah, it's
nice
definitely, you're
that.
right. It's definitely the little stuff that gets, left out of the cut, right?
Yeah.
It's like, here's the cut to the war room or whatever, but we missed dinner time, and we missed dinner time because dinner time was fun and people were hanging out and feeding Jeff and whatever, and it's like there's not room for that in this serious comic, but it's nice that it can exist elsewhere in other stories. So yeah, it's really fun. Working with Guri Hiro it's incredible.
Yeah.
Even when I think I've got a story that isn't my favorite, by the time they turn in the art, I'm like, oh my God, they made it so good.
They're the best. Recently I saw that the Vacation Jeff image that they did that you posted on Substack. I think it was. Yeah.
That's I don't know if that'll be the first story for the season 3, but it's from that first story I wrote, and I love it. The funny, but that's a perfect example of them drawing a thing and it just being so much better than what you put on the page, because at the end of that story, I did an optional panel. I was like, optional panel, this thing, which I thought would be funny. And then I was scrolling through the art. It was just like, they're rough layouts, but their rough layouts are still like very cute. And like, you can tell everything that's happening. I mean, everyone's layouts are different, but theirs are like that. And so I got to the final, like the whole thing was cute and I was sort of smiling throughout. And then I got to the last panel and that was my laugh out loud. And it was because it was the best joke in the whole thing. And I love that they did it and I love how they did it. And I love that took the optional panel to be the favorite moment in the whole thing. It was great. They're fantastic.
Oh. What's it like working with them? Do you guys have like a translator that you
I don't get to talk to them a lot, to be honest. It's a little more in this last 6 months, this last year, maybe I've gotten to talk to them a little more directly. But prior to that, it was just all through Marvel and through my editor. And then like they'd forward it on. And then at some point I got looped in so that now I know the translator and, whatever. But so that's a translator they use on their end. I don't really know how that works, if that's driven by them or Marvel. I suspect they do so much American work. I suspect it's on their end. They just hire someone as part of their side of things.
Nice. Do you think that, so over time, Jeff has had like a lot of different looks. He's been like a lanky puppy. He had kind of like a chicken sort of look after Chris Bachlo had a hold of him. Then there's the round boy. Do you think that he's finally like been locked into a consistent style now that Guri Hiro has become sort of the definitive Jeff artist?
Yes, I would say so. Listen, their design style is always so good and it's so fitting for this character that you'd be hard pressed to argue against it. But also, I just think the plain fact of the matter is that even though Jeff seems like the super popular character, he was only in a handful of books. And since those books were, he was in 4-ish issues of West Coast Avengers under 3 different artists. And then he was in Deadpool under 2 different artists. And no, 3, because Kevin Lebranda was actually the first one to do the more round boy Gurihiru shape, even before Gurihiru did it, because Gurihiru did this incredible piece that was like an exhibition poster that had Spider-Gwen and Squirrel Girl and Ms. Marvel and Jeff on the poster. And even there, he was still more shark-shaped and less round boy. And then Kevin Lebranda did a super round version of him in the one where Deadpool goes to Krakoa. And around that same time, I think, or shortly thereafter, maybe Gurihiru was starting to work on the strip, and so he really got solidified. So I just think he's out there so visually now as the Gurihiru design that it's unlikely to change. But I also think it's a really good fit for him. I think obviously Daniele Di Niccolo deserves credit for the original design. And that was fun, but I do think the round boy shape is probably here to stay.
That's good.
Which is good for someone like me, because I'm better at drawing the round boy version of Jeff.
Yeah. It's so funny though. Like you see like the Gurihiru print, and then they've done like other things. They had him a lot as an Easter egg.
Yeah.
There's like another print they did where he's like a bit longer. He's got longer limbs. He's got the side fins and stuff like that. So you can see like kind of the in between pieces as he's being like shaped together.
Yeah. Before we started doing the series, my headcanon was, I told some people, I was like, well, maybe it's that those side fins, maybe those are when he's wet. Those pop out when he's wet. But now we've showed him wet a bunch of times and we haven't showed any side fins. So
yeah. Like I'm looking at my Jeff the Landshark cup that my sister made. This was like when Deadpool was still happening. And I've got one of them is where he's like holding the coffee cup with his fins at the table.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's from West Coast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's got lucky there. And speaking of West Coast, you mentioned that you're in like other interviews and stuff, you mentioned that you're a big fan of Next Wave Agents of Hate, which is really evident from how you've championed Glorious New Age for Elsa Bloodstone. And I really fell in love with her in your Deadpool run.
Thank you. She's a great character.
She's one of my favorites now. It's just really cool. But Landsharks feel like they're really cut from the same sort of cloth as Killer Koalas and Broccoli People and stuff like that. Would you say that Next Wave had a big tonal influence on like the comedy of West Coast Avengers?
I do think, that's one of those things where you're not even sort of aware of it consciously. But yeah, Next Wave Agents of Hate is one of my favorite books. It's definitely my favorite superhero comedy book. I love the chaos of it and like the wackiness of it. And like, I don't know, maybe there's a fine line and we all sort of have our own, taste level that we're interested in, but I don't like wacky stuff being completely like, run out of comics. Like I doesn't mean I don't want like serious, very weighty stuff and everything, but we should be able to do wacky stuff too, like broccoli headed robot men and killer koala. Like why if we can have those things, why wouldn't we have them? They're amazing. I guess that's just my argument. It's the same argument I have when people are like, why are you mashing these genres together? I was like, why not?
Yeah.
I was like, it's interesting. It's fun. It creates new forms of things. Like, everything feels like a subversion of a thing anyway at this point. So why not make some really fun, interesting subversions, you know?
Yeah.
I do think that there was a hope that we were going to do some next wave, and Jeff certainly would have been part of that. But it's not going to happen now, and it's a bummer. But he would have been a great fit in there, and I think he and Elsa would have been a super hit together in that. So
yeah. But I guess it's not impossible that they would show up together in the future,
yeah,
right?
it could happen. I mean, I guess it could definitely happen, and I don't even have to write it. But I guess it could happen that I could get to write it. That could be a thing, maybe someday. We'll see.
That'd be neat. Because I think you said that she was originally going to be like the role that Kate is in, and it's Jeff.
Oh, well, not entirely. No, I was just trying to switch out. I was just trying to use different characters that had been associated with him in the comp, because I like the idea. First of all, I like to get away from, I hear a lot of people online saying Gwen is his owner, and I understand that they're possessive of Gwen, and because he's a very popular character, they like want her to get credit for being his owner, but nobody is his owner. He's not a pet. Like he's just slightly too smart to be able to be anyone's pet. So I like showing him sort of bouncing around the Marvel universe. I think that's one of his strengths as a character, is that he can do that, and that everyone just accepts it. Like he's sleeping on Black Widow's floor, and she's like, okay, whatever. Like, I mean, he just sort of does what he wants, and because everybody likes him, they just sort of allow it. It's sort of this funny idea. And so I like to make sure and show off characters he's most connected to, like Gwen and Kate, and Deadpool's only been in one because he's not as great a vibe fit for the book. For the series, I don't think. But yeah, what you're remembering is I think it was in season 1, when Jeff has a bath time incident. In that, I wrote that as Elsa originally instead of Kate, like Kate bathing him in the bathtub. It was Elsa, but they felt she wasn't recognizable enough. And I think they're right. I mean, with the colors, it helps, but you know, Kate is so definable, and that costume has become so well known. And then she's attached to him already in previous stories. So like all those things are good context clues for people. And the editors felt like Elsa didn't have enough visibility to be recognizable for people. They're like, well, they think it's Mary Jane? We don't know, you know? So it's fair. It's a bummer, but fair.
I love how now Fuji still pairs him with Quentin. Because like I don't know, like you're talking about the idea of like Gwen owning him, and I remember like and people being like possessive of that, and like I remember at the beginning, or rather the end of the series being like, oh yeah, they're like a couple, and they're like the parents of Jeff, and then that makes Wade like the wacky uncle that lets the kids watch R-rated movies, even though he couldn't do that.
Yeah,
bad example.
Yeah, but Quentin was a good. He was like a good example for me of sort of not of a character taking you by surprise. Like, I was a little nervous to write him. I wasn't sure where we were going to go with it. And then like he and Gwen just had this really great, weird, interesting chemistry on the page. And it like really made me almost immediately unlock like sort of a different side of him. And within that side of him, it really made sense for him to be love, but be incredibly irritated by this little shark that thought he was so great.
Yeah. But him and Gwen, they were my OTP. They were my one true pair. I miss them so much. Gwen had to get one more date into not having a connection. Someone.
Yeah, although I mean, I do feel like the things they're doing with her, they do feel. They do feel organic to what that character's about and like the journey she's on. And I also think it's representation we probably need.
Oh yeah, that part of it I saw, and I'm like, yeah, I'm willing to let it go if it means that people get to have like a row representation. And
I think it's important, but I think there's a way to like.
I hope
still. Yeah.
I hope they keep in touch. Anyways. As a creator of Jeff, what's it like to see him explode in popularity? Like, I know you've been asked this a lot, but he wasn't a Marvel Snap card then, and now he is a Marvel Snap card.
I think it's really, really fun. It's really fun. I can't say anything bad about it. I'm a little possessive, so it is hard sometimes to see other people write him or do things with him that I don't feel are quite right. But mostly it's been fine, and mostly it's been great. And, certainly stuff like Marvel Snap is super fun. I think it's hard, though, when you're a creator who's struggling. How many millions of dollars will Jeff make Marvel Comics in just my lifetime, not his lifetime, which is eternal, but how about mine? And it's hard to not feel some resentment about that. Could I have done that on my own without Marvel? No, of course not. So, it's hard to also argue, oh, I should be paid $1 million instead. But it still doesn't feel great. Like, you want to just feel happy about this cool thing you made, but then you're like, wow, I'm really struggling to pay my rent. It would be great if I had some Jeff the Land Shark money in the bank account somewhere.
As someone who's not employed by Marvel, I can easily say that, like, you deserve to be paid more. Like, everyone, you just hear all these horror stories, and then they're making all this money with, like, these movies, and it's just.
If he makes the jump to something significant, I'll probably get a little bit of money, which is nice. But it's hard even to be like, it sort of feels like you should get a little bit of money for him showing up in a Marvel Snap game, but like, that stuff isn't real, and like, he's been an action figure a couple times, but there's height limits on action figures and stuff, so it's like there are all these little rules about what you do and don't get paid for, and the end result is most of the time you don't get paid, and it doesn't feel great. But I think there's a weird line where you just have to be like, I made this cool thing and I can't feel bad about it, that people love it and want to play with it and want to do stuff with it. And I made it under the name of another company. So that's going to change the way in which I get to engage with it. I don't own it. So it's hard, but it's also, it's a good lesson. First of all, and I'm not trying to make it out like it's some horrible experience. It's great. It's awesome. It's awesome to have people coming up to me and talking to me on social media and stuff about Jeff, and like the genuine affection they have for him. When people say they want to use him in a story, like, it's incredibly flattering. Like, it's super fun. But, it's hard when you're struggling with other parts of your life to like keep all that cordoned off,
Yeah, it's like the Ed Brubaker thing where people mention like he made more money cameoing in The Winter Soldier than basically creating that whole status quo.
It's very upsetting.
Yeah, it's pretty horrifying, and all the comic book stories, and just like, as someone who like wanted to write comics and then just becoming suddenly like disillusioned like so fast over all of that, it's a lot. Yeah. Anyways, more Jeff.
Yeah. Listen, demand him in your next movie or animated short or something, and I'll definitely get a check of some kind. So the more popular he is, the better. Like, it's good.
Get that Jeff money. So Jeff is frequently described as, this is like a very sharp left turn, but Jeff is frequently described as a baby land shark. Is he a baby, or is he just a little guy?
He's just little. He's not going to get bigger.
Yeah, because
I tried to sort of put a bullet in that by showing him in the future, but it only sort of worked. I think but it's my own mistake. It's just one of those funny things where something you say early on, we were saying baby. And I think even when he's in West Coast Avengers for his first couple introductory captions, I think it says Jeff the Baby Land Shark or something like that. But yeah, it a little bit bothers me that it's Jeff the Baby Land Shark in Marvel.
Yeah.
And you're like, fuck, wish they could have just called me. I could have been like, you know what? Just drop the baby. He's not getting any bigger. But whatever. If these are the problems we have, it's pretty good.
But I saw the future thing, and then I saw in Deadpool that's like the first time that it's doubted on page that he's a baby. Like
Yeah.
Deadpool has like his card, and he's like, "Is a baby?" And then he's got like a little question mark there. Land chart.
Yeah.
Um,
I do love that card, man.
yeah.
God, I remember when I was writing that Deadpool, I was very nervous. There was a lot of pressure on it. It was like the first book anyone had ever given me that didn't have a female lead in the title. And I love writing women, so it's not really something I complain about, but it's a way to like pigeonhole you inadvertently or otherwise, or pigeonhole yourself. And so there felt like a lot of pressure. And also the last book by Scotty Young, who's great, hadn't done great. And so it was just a lot of pressure. And I remember when I realized that I was going to do these cards of the monsters. Oh, God, I was so excited about that idea. It really made me love that issue. It took what was just like a sort of average issue and really elevated it to one of my faves.
Yeah, love that stuff. And honestly, I think the best writers of Deadpool are people that aren't men. I think like the current run by Alyssa Wong, what they're doing over there is like it's great. It's great stuff.
Yeah, it is really great. It is really great. Although I don't know if Alyssa can keep doing this to me, following my runs and like doing really great runs. She maybe needs to go they maybe need to go do that somewhere else.
Yeah.
Have you read I don't know if do you read a lot of DC, because their Spirit World is incredibly good also. I've been talking about it to everybody because I just love it.
I haven't checked it out yet. I need to though. I'm like a very casual outside of DC.
Yeah.
Like I know some things, but like,
well, if you like their writing from Deadpool or anything else, it's very good. It's got John Constantine, which I feel like is a great character that a lot of people like. It's got Cassandra Cain, which is one of my favorite characters of all time. And then it's got the three leads, really. It's got other characters too, but the third lead is the title character, Xanthi. And it's a non-binary character. I mean, it's an incredible character. Like, I can't wait to use Xanthi. It's a great character. The story is great. It's interesting. The art is beautiful. I'm sorry to say I don't have the artist's name at the tip of my hands, which I should just learn it because I've said that like 3 times now. It's making me feel like a dick. But the art's great. The writing's great. I'm very impressed that they were able to do all of these things at DC Comics, which isn't a swing on DC Comics. It's just, these are some hard things to do at corporations. And they did a bunch of them all in one book. Well, in one little line, because they have a few of them. There's like a little mini line. It's Spirit World, The Vigil by Ram V, and crap, I can't remember the other one. Oh, City Boy. Anyway, they're all really interesting. Spirit World is the winner for me, but a lot of people are talking about Vigil a lot, so it's worth a look.
Nice. I'll have to check it out. I do know that John Constantine is the grumpy British person who deals with the supernatural, and you know, I like those. So
yes.
But definitely, that's like the amalgam character there, the Elsa Constantine, something like that.
Yes. That's all the kind of stuff I really like the weird street level stuff and the weird magic stuff and the black market stuff. I love all that stuff. Very fun.
It's Jeff is unique in how open it is to new readers, like especially young readers. How does it feel knowing that Jeff could be like certain kids like first exposure to comics?
I love it, right? I love it. I mean, it feels so gratifying to know that, because one of my first creator-owned things, really my first creator-owned thing in comics, was a middle grade book called Mega Princess that I did with Boom. And it was a complete failure sales-wise. I mean, like, I made almost no money. It was just awful. It was an awful experience in that regard. I'm very proud of the book. I think Boom is proud of the book too. I enjoyed working with Boom. Brianne Drouhard was our artist. She was amazing. It was great. It's a great book. It was a great experience, but I feel like we sold about 6 fucking copies. It was exhausting. It was so much work. I made almost no money. And I feel like God, it was so frustrating. And it was so frustrating to be someone who'd been saying as a commentator for years and a reviewer that, I don't care that kids' books are lost leaders and that we got to do it because if we don't make them, there won't be a future of comics because we won't be creating any new comics readers. And, as someone who got stabbed real hard with my own words, I get why this is hard for Marvel and DC, these sort of leaders in this industry. It's hard to be like, okay, yeah, we'll just take a loss on that book because it doesn't have the readership, but we know we need to have it so that we can build more of this. So I've always I've understood this since Mega Princess, since that experience, and I've sort of softened my critique of that. But it's very gratifying to see it working with Jeff, to see it be cost effective or to see it be cost positive enough for Marvel, whatever, that they want to do it, that they keep asking for more, that they promote it. I mean, I couldn't believe on that Venomverse issue, I had bought some variant covers. I had pulled some variant covers so I could put them in my store. And I hadn't gotten my comps yet. I just got my comps this week. And there's like a whole little cute, like a made to look like a sticker on the cover. And it's like, it's Jeff inside or whatever. Yeah. And I was like, oh
he's
my
the selling
God,
point.
he's so popular. He got a little fake sticker. Like I was so excited for him. And so I love seeing it work. Like as someone who said a lot of shit that I believe about children's like children in comics, kids comics, all of that, and then got dashed against the rocks very painfully myself when I tried to do it. It's very gratifying to see Marvel and I managing to do it together. I loved seeing, I can't remember what crossover they were being annoyed with. But some retailer came at me back in the spring when the print version of Jeff was in shops.
Yeah.
And he was like, my God, he's like, I could sell this all day long. He's like, please, if you have any pull with Marvel, tell them to stop doing whatever they're doing and do more of this. I can sell this. And I sort of laughed and I was like, thank you. I was like, we'll try to do as much as we can, but, so it's great. It's great to see it working, but it's got to work more than once. We got to do a bunch more,
Yeah. Well, I mean, hopefully, like there's been a bunch of like post Jeff funny animal comics, and it's kind of become like a subgenre of
right. But I mean,
in different like themes and different.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I'm not swinging on anyone who's doing that. I've read some of those. Some of them are very good. They're very cute. It's fun to see Jeff show up in them as well. And I'm not saying they shouldn't exist or that they're not as good or better than Jeff. Sure. But I think there was a really great quote I saw. And I think it was, what's his name? What's the actor's name who plays Shang-Chi?
It's on the tip of my tongue.
What is his name? What is his name? Simu Liu.
Yeah.
So I saw a quote. I'm pretty sure it was by Simu Liu, and he's like, and he was just sort of saying that he goes, I think we're getting the wrong message here from the success of the Barbie movies. Like, it's not to make more movies about toys. It's to make more movies by women about women, about women's things. Like, look, they want it. Like, there's something here. And I feel a little bit, not as dramatically, but, Jeff's success isn't make 1,000 animal comics, right? It's, it's something more nuanced than that. I don't know what it is, but it's not quite that.
I don't expect someone higher up to figure it out.
I don't know. Maybe I said enough incendiary things, and this it'll make its way to them.
I don't know. I don't know if we have that kind of influence on this podcast. But
I mean, there are certain things I could say that I'm sure will get it set over. But I'm going to try not to say those because I don't want to get an email either, or worse, a phone call, right?
Yeah. But yeah, it's frustrating. It's frustrating seeing like people at the top get the wrong messages, and just everyone like doubling down on cinematic universes. And it's like, how many dark universes do you have to have? Like, how many, like, we're Universal and we're gonna make a bunch of monster movies where they're together, and we only made the Mummy, and we're kind of didn't land. And,
Yeah, you just wonder, how does this happen, right? Like,
yeah.
Anyway,
when you don't trust your writers, Sid. Does Jeff miss MODOK's other land sharks?
I mean, yes, in the sense that I think Jeff sometimes, I think he knows enough to be curious about his community and like where he comes from and if there's anything for him. But I would also say that why he ended up with Gwen and not is because he doesn't fit. I mean, like most our favorite superheroes, he's a misfit from his original family in some way or another. In our case, I would say he's a runt of the litter, and he's so, maybe he'd be tossed back even because he's like sort of a mistake. And then I would say he's more intelligent and ow, sorry, my cat.
That's right.
As I'm saying, he has more agency than my cat. My cat's like, does he now? I think, ow, you're still doing it, bud. I do think, he's got more agency than most of those other created sharks. I have to believe that, even though I created them. Or it's too sad to think, what is MODOK? Like, I don't want to think MODOK's got a whole world of Jeffs under his sway. I think he let those land sharks go probably, or they just doing their own. I don't know. You've now asked me a question I haven't thought enough about. But they're not the same as Jeff. Jeff left because there wasn't, it doesn't mean you don't want to go home sometimes just because you knew you had to leave. But I do think that even if he found them again or went back, he doesn't fit with them.
Yeah. Because there's
like he's with the family he should be with, his found family, of Marvel heroes.
Rather than MODOK, who's like, I don't know, the closest thing to not a biological father, but his creator is, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's why we did that. I mean, that's part of why I did, MODOK has appeared in 2 stories, well, 3, I guess, sort of. And, in the first one, Jeff was just attacking him. He doesn't like him. He made him in a lab. He experimented on him. MODOK's not a good guy. But at the same time, when he got mad to realize MODOK was profiting off of Jeff merch, what he found was not a megalomaniacal monster, but someone who genuinely loves the Jeff toys and maybe misses Jeff or thinks he misses Jeff. I mean, I think he doesn't really know Jeff. He never really did. So he's missing sort of a creation myth he's made himself. But I think Jeff has a very big heart, and as much trauma and feelings and resentment as Jeff might have to him, he saw that and went, I mean, that's someone in pain. I'm not gonna hurt that person more. Like, they're just getting joy out of this, so I'm gonna let it go. And I think that's why Jeff's beautiful.
Yeah, he's a very heroic figure. He's flawed. He can be petty, but then he does the right thing.
Super petty, super food motivated, but he's a very good guy. He's very chaotic and mischief making, but he definitely is never trying to hurt anyone,
Yeah. That's where we all love him.
Mm-hmm.
Is it land shark, like one word, or land shark like
you know what? I write it both ways all the time, and then I just let whatever autocorrect I'm on autocorrect me to the way it thinks it should be.
Okay. But if you're like a super scientist with like a giant head, you're like a giant head in a chair, and like you had to copyright it because you were making merchandise off of them. I think that's all the questions that I have, except for, I don't know. There's one, but it's kind of like out of place. It's just like where I was going to ask, like, what happened to Quentin? Like, why was he sad about leaving the X-Men? Did he leave because he didn't have the powers anymore, or what was his reason for
Well,
going to West Coast,
you mean of how he got
into West
lumped
Coast
into
Avengers?
West Coast?
Yeah,
Well, that was coming out of Christina Strain's Generation X. Yeah. So I can't remember. We had a couple conversations about it, but I mean, I think it was just the idea was like he'd had these not great experiences. He wasn't feeling appreciated or wanted, and maybe that was legitimate, like not that he deserved it, but that was really happening to him. I think it's hard to say whether that was his perception, right? Because he's pretty in his own head as a character, like maybe more than any other telepath we've ever seen. He's like a real narcissist, right?
yeah,
So I think the idea is I'm not being appreciated. I mean, that's where like the fucking I devamped Jubilee and all I got was this like
yeah.
he did these great big things and like nobody fucking cared, you know? And
Yeah.
so I think he was looking for something different was most of the gist of it, and feeling sort of unappreciated or whatever. Really one of my favorite little moments from that series came from a weakness in my writing him, which is that he's hard to write in an ensemble. He's very, very powerful.
Yeah.
So when you've got someone as powerful as Quentin Quire on a team with someone like Kate Bishop, who is very skilled, but technically has no powers, like it's very unbalanced. And the one without powers is your leader to a narcissistic, super powered Omega mutant. Like, you know, it's really out of balance. And so because of that, it was very hard to write from time to time. And he mostly ends up for a lot of the like fight scenes, he's doing like TK bubbles and stuff and catching people and protecting people and whatever. And he yells about that. One of my favorite sort of meta moments was him yelling about that later. Like, you're barely using me here. Like, I'm just doing TK. And she's like, you're doing the most important thing, which is making sure nobody dies. I think America is the one who like reads in the riot act about it. And I thought like it was a really great moment for him to be like, for her to be like, can you just look outside yourself for a second? Like, we're trying to save lives. Like, you're trying to compete to be the best superhero. We're just trying to make people not get hurt here. Like, weigh it, you know? And I feel like he came around a little bit after that of like, he did care about these people and maybe they would have been dead if he hadn't been doing what he'd been doing. And like, that was sort of huge. I feel like it slotted him into the team in a little different way. And it made him more malleable for my purposes, which was good.
I wish we got more. That was my favorite series. It's very personal to me.
I had a lot of stuff I wanted to do, but I mean, we found out we were getting canceled at like 5 or 6 or something. It was very early. And then they pulled our artists. I mean, I was only going to have Daniele through 7 anyway. And he did a great job. We were very lucky, but they, you know, at that point, it's very hard to keep, or I had to condense the whole last arc, like all this stuff I'd been planning. I had to jam it into fewer issues, which was very difficult. And then we had to ask artists to come on and do it, but then they would pull an artist away when they would get an offer for a new series because they wouldn't want to, you know, it's like, do you want to draw issue 9 of a series that's ending at issue 11, or do you want to launch a new issue 1? Like, it's not even a question for artists. So, you know, you're like losing your artists, your story's getting compressed. It was a big bummer. It was a big bummer because I had a lot of themes I had a lot of things I wanted to do, but it was a good reminder to, you know, if you have stuff you want to do, get right to it. You know, don't take your time.
Yeah. Still, it's just, I don't know, just thinking about like what might have been, and just,
yeah,
it's
a lot.
It was really good. It was,
yeah.
Are you able to like talk about some ideas you had, or is that all like NDA'd?
I don't know that it's NDA'd, but I don't know that it would be super. I mean, I have an outline and a document file full of things, but I mean, I would say primarily I wanted to play with Gwen's powers. Our approach was that her powers were working differently because she was no longer the protagonist or the lead protagonist. She was in an ensemble. And so her powers were reflecting that. Like, she didn't have the same control she had when she was in her own story. So that was something we really wanted to play with. And we wanted to play with that relationship with her and Quentin, and like, how much could he help her if he thought she was really crazy, or like, and all of that stuff. The Ramon and America thing was going to be, I wanted to slow roll into that. I mean, we probably still would have started what we started where we started it, but it would have grown a lot bigger and better. And Alloy would have probably come onto the team in a similar way, but then would have remained with the team. I would have liked to cycle in some older heroes in different capacities. I was interested in exploring the Kate and Johnny thing, but also, I was very interested in making Kate bisexual, or yeah. And that was not that wasn't something I could do.
Yeah.
Which, listen, I get it. I mean, I'm sure someone listens to this interview and they want to be really mad at Marvel. And, I get frustrated too, because I think, it's hard when you're telling stories and you can't do exactly what you want, but, you're playing with somebody else's characters, and a lot of these characters are $1 million characters. I mean, it's not like a freelance writer just gets to come in and be like, oh yeah, everyone walks backwards now. And people are like, oh, okay. Like, I mean, you just can't, they have these ideas and they have things in plan. They have things planned years out that you have no idea about. And they're like, oh yeah, well, she can't be this because she's going to be this in 2 years or whatever, so it's just you don't always have your eyes on, like, I don't know. I feel like as a freelancer, you're playing chess or you're playing checkers, but like someone else is playing chess above you, and it's like, you don't know what the results of that are, but they somehow trickle down and affect your game too, and the decisions you can make. And so, I mean, if you want to be happy doing this kind of thing, you have to sort of make peace with that it's most of the time, it's not, there's no ill will. Nobody's trying to stop you from doing something cool. It's just, there's a lot of little hoops and things that have to be jumped through, and there's a lot of fine print,
Yeah. Just like the uncomfortable idea that like they'll probably never let Carol like kiss a woman. Like, I imagine there are like people who are like, why don't you do that? Why don't you do that? And they don't like get that you don't have like the final say on.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's
anything like that.
It's literally $1 billion character. Like, they're not letting me make those decisions, no matter how popular our comic book is, like, it's just not reality.
Yeah. But, all the more reason to support creator-owned works.
Yes. True. The Cull, Black Cloak. Also not creator owned, but Birds of Prey, first week of September. Yep. It's really fun.
Yeah. I didn't have any of those questions because Dan is going to later on. He's probably going to do an interview with you about that if he gets the chance.
Well, that's okay.
Yeah. And he's the one who knows all the DC stuff. So.
Well, it's okay. It's better not to be grilled yet. I have to say, I've been doing a lot of reading, and not that I wasn't a DC fan before, but, and in fact, except for research stuff, I feel like I've been doing a better job of keeping up with DC because that's the stuff I was buying. Whereas Marvel comics were like things I was downloading for, like, hey, you should know about this thing that's happening because it's going to affect your book or whatever, Yeah. But it's still a lot of reading to get into. But, I'm a little nervous, like, going on a podcast and things that I don't have the lore down as much or as naturally as I do with, Marvel characters, Yeah. But I'll make it.
You wouldn't know what Killer Moth's favorite food is?
Definitely not. I'm going to have to take a pass on that one.
Darn it. I was hoping that you can make a canon that he likes, I don't know.
Yeah, what would you want it to be?
I don't know. I don't even know.
Anyway. All right. Well, I probably got to go, if only because I'm melting, because I have to have the fan off to record and it's so hot here.
No. Okay. Yeah. Well, we're out of questions anyways. So it's been very good having you on. And it's been
thanks for inviting me.
Even more than I could anticipate. Like basically like when I first did comic writing, they're like, who do you want to interview? And I was like, I want to do Kelly Thompson and then Grant Morrison. And they're like, okay, you can't get either of those. And I'm like, fine. I'll figure it out. I'll do it one day.
You could definitely give me. I don't know that I belong in the same sentence with Grant Morrison, but I appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right. Take care.
Thanks. You too. The Geek Crashers.